Take this as kind of like my 23 and 23. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am taking you through all of the books that were released, that were published in 2022, that I was really excited for, that I really wanted to get to, and then for some reason just didn't. Either I didn't have a copy of them before the end of 2022, either I just couldn't get my hands on them, either I had prioritized other books, which does generally tend to happen. But there are a couple of books on this list that I had such high hopes to get to, and then they just fell through the cracks for the entire year. First up is Leeson Love by Fallon Ballard. This copy was gifted to me as a kind of a book swap by my friend Roisin. I gave her a copy of Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I'd had my sights on this for a while. I loved the idea of it. This book follows Sadie, who goes onto a dating app to try and find a new relationship. And she matches with a guy called Jack and they decide to meet at a pub one evening. And the questions that he asks her are a little bit too kind of close for comfort for a first date. It's stuff like, what do you do? How much money do you make? Are you very clean or tidy around the house? Or are you kind of slovenly? And it comes out that Sadie didn't sign up for a dating app. She actually signed up for like a roommate app. But she's also looking for a new home situation, so she decides to move in with Jack. It has all of the hallmarks of a kind of a friends to lovers story. It has all the hallmark of a kind of forced proximity relationship. And those are two things I really love looking for in books. So I'm really hoping that when I do eventually get to this, I'm going to be absolutely spellbound by it. Next up is Taste by Stanley Tucci. I obsess over this man. This man, I worship the ground that he walks on. If he turned up at my front door and said, we need to leave immediately, I'm not even going to pack. Whatever we need, we can pick it up on the road. I really love the cookbooks that I have read of his. I've cooked a couple of things from them. And when I found out that this was coming out, I knew that I wanted to get my hands on it. As I understand, this is kind of more of a memoir than a cookbook. It's kind of a memoir of Stanley's life as the son of Italian immigrants living in America. It goes through his first marriage and the loss of his first wife to cancer. It goes through his own cancer diagnosis. He was diagnosed with throat cancer in the late 2010s. And it kind of goes through as well what that life was like for him, because he did lose his love of food. He did lose his ability to taste some things. He did lose his ability to chew or to digest food as easily. So I feel like this is going to be a very personal, a very heartfelt and a very hard-hitting book, but I cannot wait to get to it. I think as well there are a couple of recipes dotted around this book, and I know a couple of people who've read it and loved it. So I'm really excited to be on the same train. Next up is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegmund Brocke. This isn't something that would generally have worked for me because it's a second chance romance and those don't generally hit for me as often as other tropes do. But it's about a couple who works in books. It's about two authors who had such a glittering literary career and whose names were celebrated and were lauded. But when they got divorced about 3 years ago, everything fell to the wayside. I love a book that is about books in literally any way, shape or form. So I think that when I pick this one up, I'm going to have a really great time with it. I just kind of have to push myself to get past the second chance romance part of it. Next up is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I read my first Lucy Foley in October of last year. I read the guest list and I was spellbound by it. It was such a gripping tale. It was such a great story and it had a character called Aoife in it. So it was basically a win-win all around. As soon as I read that, I knew that I wanted to read more of her books, so my aunt gave me a copy of The Hunting Party. She had a copy of it lying around and gave it to me over Christmas break, but I also went out and bought a copy of The Paris Apartment myself around the end of last year. I think I'm going to leave it either for March for the Irish Readathon because Lucy has Irish roots, or I might read it again in October and kind of keep that little system flowing. Let's see how we get on with it. But I have got a feeling that this is kind of a locked room mystery in a way. And I know that a couple of people that I've spoken to about this book said that they loved the first half of it, but it felt a little bit flat in the second half. I did hear that about a lot of other books, and then I've ended up absolutely loving them personally. So I don't know if it's something that I'm going to take into heed, I'm going to take it into account when I'm reading it, because everybody reads the same book differently, so let's see how I get on with it. Next up is Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen. This is a book about two audiobook narrators. The main character, Sue-Ann, used to be a famous actress, but she had been in an accident recently and now she has her self-confidence just plummeting. So to keep up with what she is able to do, she decides to go into audiobook narration. And she's doing a dual narration, but the male narrator lives across the country. They've never seen each other. They don't interact with each other apart from just coming into the booth and reading the parts together. But they clash heads anytime that they're not on mic. But there is a little bit of a you've got mail situation happening in this book, and that's one of my favorite rom-coms. It's one of my favorite tropes. So I am kind of excited to see how it's going to go in the words of this book. Also, Julia Whelan herself is a really famous audiobook narrator, so I have a feeling that this is going to be really well written in that aspect. It's going to bring in a lot of what audiobook narration is like. She's going to have first-hand knowledge of what the situation is, and I'm so excited to see what happens behind the curtain. Next up is a little bit of a new venture for me, and it is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I obsess over Juno. I love Juno Dawson's books. I've read all of her YA books and I absolutely loved them. Stay Another Day is one of my favorite Christmas books that I read recently, and the London trilogy Clean is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. So when I knew that she was coming out with an adult book, I knew that I wanted to get my hands on it. I have got this copy of the physical book, but for some reason I've also got a NetGalley copy given to me in the last couple of weeks with the audiobook, which is narrated by Nicola Coughlan from Derry Girls and from Bridgerton, and I love her as an actress. So I might tandem read both of them. I might read along with the physical copy while I'm reading the audiobook. I've never done it before, but I know a couple of people who have done it and they have really loved that immersive feeling of having somebody read to you as you're also reading the book. It kind of feels a little bit like sitting in a classroom at school and your teacher reading it out as you're following along with them. I love the kind of idea of the witchy vibes. I love the strong friendship that the girls will have had over the whole 10 years that they've known each other and the book takes place. I also feel like there's a kind of a Spice Girls reference in this book. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I've heard a couple of people have talked about that aspect of it. And I was a huge Spice Girls fan as a child, so obviously that part's really going to hit my buttons. Next up is a book that I saw my dad reading, and now I'm a little bit concerned that he's gotten ideas, and that is How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie. I have heard some mixed things about this. I know that Leanne from Literary Diversions didn't rate this as much as I think she would have wanted to, but like I said, I'm going to go into it with an open mind. I'm going to go into it with a kind of a blank slate and see how I feel about it. This is about a woman named Grace who is a serial killer and who has accidentally murdered her own family. And I feel like a lot of this book is going to be the cover-ups of how it happened and not having people find out what happened, as well as Grace trying to live her own personal life. I'm really excited to see how that works out because I've read a book with a similar premise called How to Kill Men and Get Away with It, but I didn't love that one. But I loved the idea of the plot. I loved the idea of how it was done. I just didn't like how it was written. I didn't like how far-fetched it was. So hopefully this is a similar plot, but completely different treatment. Next up is The Layover by Lacey Walden, and I heard Nikki from Nikki's Book Nook talking about this and she sold it to me so much. This is about Ava, who is a flight attendant and who is hanging up her wings after 10 years. She's got one more flight that she needs to go on and then her retirement can begin. But on her flight is Jack, who is a pilot for the airline that she works for, and they have never gotten along together. She's kind of made her peace with it because it's just one more flight and then they can go their separate ways and they never have to see each other again. But the plane that they are on has a slight malfunction and they need to have a layover for a couple of days while everything is being sorted out. And of course, this forced proximity brings Jack and Ava a little bit closer together. I'm a kind of a weird person in that I love flying. I love airports. I love airplanes. I used to work in Dublin Airport, so I feel like having that kind of situation in a book is something that's going to really drag me into the story. But let's just see how I get along with it, because I know that there's a couple of people who haven't loved it. There's a couple of people who did, and I don't feel like this book is getting a lot of discussion. I don't feel like this book is getting a lot of talk at the moment. So hopefully this is one that I'm going to get to this summer, and I will have a great time with it too. Next up is Forever Home by Graham Norton. I have read every one of Graham's fiction books so far, and I have loved them. I didn't love Holding as much as I did A Keeper and as much as I did Homestretch, but when Forever Home came out, I knew that I wanted to get a copy. This book is about Carol and Declan. Carol and Declan are given a second chance at love later on in life, but all of the people on Carol's side of the family, her mother, her children, are starting to get a little bit concerned about who Declan is. They don't really trust him. They don't think that he is the perfect match for their mother, for their daughter, for their friend, for their sister. And so when Carol moves into Declan's house to take care of him as he is going through an illness and as he's recovering, things start to come out of the woodwork that may be proving everybody else right. Graham does these kind of twisty, thrillery-esque books so well that he kind of makes you think that you have got everything figured out, but then he takes you down a completely different path and he brings you down a completely different road. So I'm really excited to see how this one is going to go. I love The Keeper so much, so if it's got a kind of a similar vibe to that, where you find out loads of family drama, loads of situations that everybody shouldn't have been in, I think I've got a winner here in my hands. Next up is Paris Davenport is About to Crumble by Alexis Hall. And the reason that I didn't get to this one so far in 2022 is that I only read Rosalind Palmer in November of last year. And in December, I go through a little bit kind of a reading slump. I only concentrate on Christmassy books. And this wasn't one of them, but I did get it delivered in late 2022. I absolutely adored Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake. So much so that as soon as I had it finished, I went out and immediately bought a copy of this, had it delivered to the house. I knew that I wanted to get a copy of it. The Bake Expectations world is so wonderful. It's so cozy. And I feel like this is a male-male romance between Paris and one of the other contestants on the Bake Expectations show. And if it's got all of the love and all of the coziness and all of the bake-off vibes that Rosalind Palmer had, this is going to be an absolute winner for me. Next up is one that I was absolutely peer pressured into getting, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I have heard so many people have read this book and absolutely adored it. It is, of course, not my usual read. It is about software developers who end up working together on a project and then end up falling in love, but I don't think that the romance is a big part of this book. I don't think that it's even one of the big hitters of the storyline, but I have heard so many people talking about it. I've heard everybody raving over it. I kind of have to give it a go. I think as well it was one of the Goodreads Choice Awards winners, so when it's got that kind of backing from the book community, you can't not pick it up. Next up is The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. I haven't yet read The Spanish Love Deception, so I don't know what Elena's writing style is like, but I've heard better things about this than I have heard about The Spanish Love Deception, so I'm a little bit less apprehensive about this one than I would have been the other. I think this is set in the same universe as The Spanish Love Deception. I think it's a kind of a companion novel, and this is following Rosie, who is Lena from the first book's cousin or friend or so, and she has to move into Lena's apartment because Rosie's apartment has kind of gotten a little bit of water damage. There have been some burst pipes in the area. Rosie moves into Lena's apartment, but what she doesn't know is that Lucas has also been allowed to live there for a little while. So we've got forced proximity, we have got kind of enemies to strangers to lovers or things like that. I am obsessed with forced proximity. If you haven't figured that out by how many times I've already mentioned it in this video. So I feel like if I've got a forced proximity book, I think I'm going to get on pretty well with it. Finally is Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. These two are among my go-to romance authors. I've loved everything that they've written so far. So when I heard that Something Wilder was coming out, I knew that I had to pick it up, but there was a slight caveat. This is about Lily and Leo, who are working on a kind of an archaeological dig together, butting heads, not getting along with each other because they had been in a relationship previously that didn't work out, and this is now their second chance at love. Second chance romances don't always work for me, so I am a little bit apprehensive about that part. I don't know how I'm going to gel with the second chance romance part of it, even if it is a Christina Lauren book, even if I've loved their books before. I've also noticed that their books are not getting as steamy as they have been in the past. I know that The Unhoneymooners was pretty much up there, but their Beautiful Bastard series is like top tier steamy levels. I don't think that this is going to be as steamy as the other ones is, but I'm still waiting to give it a try, and I'm still going to go in with an open mind and just see how I get on with it. Those are all of the books that were released in 2022 that I should have gotten to reading yet, but absolutely have not. What book that was released in 2022 have you not gotten around to yet? Are you hoping to get to it anytime soon? If you'd like to leave me a comment but you cannot think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the calendar emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.